Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Regular Supervision as a Key to Consistency. Hope you've been enjoying some KebMo in the background. You guys are hearing everything okay. If you haven't already done so, you'll see there's a link on the middle of your screen there for click here for handouts. It's the same handouts if you had registered you would have gotten via email, but you can click there to download them, open them. Also available over there in your file share pod, you see a handouts box there. The only other late addition was the critical thinking for child welfare. That's just some additional information that we will refer to later in the webinar. Give you a moment to click on that. Okay, a quick note about this webinar. It was developed through funding from the North Carolina Division of Social Services by the Family and Children's Resource Program, which is part of the Jordan Institute for Families here at UNC Chapel Hill School of Social Work. The webinar is being recorded and will be available soon on NCSW Learn. So here are our goals for the webinar today. We'll be sharing lots of information and best practice recommendations for supervision. We certainly hope you guys get some great ideas for developing supervisors and workers, as well as understand how your role can contribute to the success of social workers. Communicating with us, as usual, many of you guys have found this chat box already. You'll see there are a couple options in the bottom left corner of this box that lets you send a message to everyone, or you can just send one to the host, which is those of us here at UNC. So this will be the primary way you guys can communicate with us. You can use this box to send in questions or comments. Sometimes it can move pretty fast, but we do have someone here that's going to help keep track of your questions. And then we look for opportunities for our presenters to answer your questions during the presentation. Since this is just a 90-minute webinar, and we have some great presenters with a lot of information to share, we may not be able to get to every single question. We'll certainly do our best. We'll develop a follow-up document that answers questions asked during the webinar, and the document will be emailed to all registered participants, as well as it'll be posted online with the webinar recording. The recording will be available on NCSW Learn and on our webpage, the Family and Children's Resource Program webpage. You'll see the link here on the screen. So please encourage others that haven't been able to attend today to go back and review the recording. All right, using icons. So here's another way you guys can communicate with us. You'll see the little man at the top of your screen raising his hand. It's a little drop down. You can drop down and indicate to us, for example, to speak louder, speak softer, or slow down. And to practice this for all of you participating as a group, so if you have a group of people participating together, could you use the raise hand icon to let us know, so we know how many groups are out there? Great. Looks like we've got a fair amount of groups out there today. Thank you very much. All right. Again, I'd like to welcome all of you to today's webinar. My name is Rick Zuckman. I'm with the Jordan Institute for Families. We have technical help from our colleagues, John McMahon, and pinch hitting for Philip today is Matt Tarpley. Just to give you guys a snapshot of the attendees registered, we had 271 people registered today. That was representing 73 counties and division staff. The majority of the staff registered includes over 200 direct line supervisors. So thank you for joining us today. Let me allow our presenters to introduce themselves, starting with Dawn. Dawn, when you click on, just remember to click the mic button to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and then hit it again to mute. While Dawn is trying to get her microphone going, let's have Amanda go ahead and introduce herself. Amanda, can you jump on?
Sure. Certainly. Good morning. I'm Amanda McGee. I'm the Social Work Program Manager and Assistant Director in Rutherford County.
Great. Think I could hear you loud and clear. Let's have Holly go ahead and introduce yourself. Holly?
Good morning, everybody. This is Holly McNeill. I'm at the division on the staff development team. I'm one of the trainers that trains Intro to Supervision, and so happy to see so many familiar names on the list.
Great. Thanks, Holly. We could hear you loud and clear as well. Dawn's still working on her microphone. We'll come back to her, and obviously we'll hear from her in a little bit. But I'll go ahead and move forward to go over our agenda for today while she's working on her mic. All right, so here's our agenda for today. We'll spend the remainder of our 90 minutes talking about an overview of some previous survey data from workers that led to statewide recommendations for supervision. We'll go over a learning plan template as a tool to support worker development. We'll hear from a county DSS supervisor's experience with how they structure staffing and supervision time. And then we'll hear a county program manager's perspective on what they believe will increase the likelihood of success of a supervisor and corresponding team. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers toward the end of the presentation. All right, so as a state, there are significant investments going on right now to further develop the capacity of supervisors in our state. So we know how vital you guys are to supporting your teams and supporting workers and ultimately families so we can improve outcomes for children and families. Holly's going to start us off by introducing some data and recommendations as we discuss regular supervision being a key to consistency in practice.
Good morning again, everybody. This is Holly, and I know many of you that have been around in supervision for a while realize that it is a journey, not a destination, because it's something you have to just keep working on. So I wanted to remind you about a survey that social workers, some of you may have filled it out as social workers, in 2011 were surveyed, and we got a really good response from this. And you can see some of the, just a few of the responses here. 71% of respondents said that they wanted to meet with their supervisor 2 times a month. And then they did not differentiate between meeting to staff cases and actual supervision that focused on the worker's professional development. One of the things that we're going to talk about today is the idea that they need both of those. There does need to be time to staff cases. There also needs to be time for development, professional development. And that may look different with different workers. You may have a new worker that you're doing development with every other week, and you may have a long-term staff that you spend 15 or 20 minutes once a month on. So that can look very different, but it is nice to set aside some specific time that is for development. Like I said, whether it's 15 minutes once a month, or whether it's a half an hour or an hour once or every 2 weeks. So how are we doing with those recommendations? This is something that the monitors have been looking at as they've been coming out to your counties, and this is what they saw. In 2016, they saw documentation of twice-monthly supervision 54% of the time in CPS assessments, which seems to be the high point, and then drops down to 33% in in-home services and 45% in foster care. So at our best, we're doing about half. Now, we also realize that that documentation may not be getting in the record. That is something you want to make sure is getting in your records, so that if anybody were ever to look at your record, they could see that the worker wasn't making decisions on their own, that they really were staffing things with supervisors. So that's something that can be helpful. All right, so some of the other recommendations from the survey, and again, these came from the answers that the workers gave us. They said that they would like to have 2 individual supervision conferences per month. We talked about that a little bit. They said it would be helpful. Oh, now they're saying they can't hear me. Can other people hear me? Okay. Okay, somebody might want to help Cabarrus County when you can. Okay, I'm going to keep going then. That might just be on Cabarrus's end. Amanda, would you mind typing in that Cabarrus, it must be on their end so they know? I'm going to keep going. The workers said that they wanted a structured format for these conferences. So not necessarily saying exactly what that structure looked like, but just to give them some kind of a format, some kind of a structure so that they know what to expect. I can speak from my worker point of view because a very long time ago I was a worker. And it was really helpful for me to know exactly what my supervisor wanted. It cut down on the stress that I felt before that meeting, and it made the meeting go a lot faster. All my friends were like, how come you get in and out so quick? I'm like, because I figured out what she wants and I go in prepared to give it to her. So having something and letting them know, in my case, I kind of had to figure it out from my supervisor, but it'd be great if they had something that just let them know what is going to be expected during that development meeting. We want to protect time for conferences. Again, some of you that have been in supervision training, if you think about your training or your learning style, you may remember that for some of us, me included as an accommodator, I really like having lots of people around me and I can multitask pretty easily. So I would do that, thinking that I was giving time to all my workers when really, for the most part, workers, most people want you to protect that time so that they can have your full attention. Now, of course, I think they all understand that if there is an emergency, then you'll need to, take a minute and talk to somebody on the phone or something like that. But otherwise, protect that time. And some of you have heard me talk about the FISH principles before. This one goes directly to the FISH principle of be there, just being with the person that's in front of you, paying attention to them, making sure that you're doing some really good listening and processing during that little bit of time out of your week that you use for development. They also ask, and this might surprise some of you, that supervisors review at least 2 cases a month and provide feedback and coaching. I think this is one of the most important things. I get asked all the time about documentation. What exactly should go in documentation? My supervisor says I do too much. My supervisor says I do too little. I have no way of telling them exactly what needs to go in their documentation because I'm not their supervisor. I can give them some ideas, but I really encourage you to give them feedback not only about documentation, but if you are sitting in on a CFT, take a few minutes after that CFT and talk about what did you see that really went well? What did you see that there might be choices for how they could do it differently? And what are some things that maybe just really need some attention? So provide some feedback as well as some coaching, some time to sit back and think about what does this look like. Amanda's going to talk more about coaching, I think, in a little bit. And then lastly, that supervisors provide coaching and mentoring on how to make the most of these individual conferences. So they don't only need coaching on their casework and their documentation, but also on how do we use this time that we have for professional development to really use it well. Again, that's going to be letting them know what you're going to talk about, what they should bring in. If you've got people that are on the right side of the learning styles, those assimilators and those divergers, remember, they need some time to think over. If you want them to tell you what's going really well for you and what are you struggling with, asking them that on the spot is going to be really tough for them. They need some time to ponder it, and then they're going to be able to give you a much better answer. So letting them know, if you have a specific question, some of you might use a stay question now and then. If you're going to ask them a stay question, send it to them a couple days in advance so they can have some time to think about it. That's part of coaching and mentoring them and thinking about at the end of your development session or your supervision session, maybe you say to them, hey, you know what? This went really well today, and it might be helpful next time if you do this and this before you come in. I think that will even make it more helpful to you. Things like that. All right, we've got a polling question for you about how often you have supervision with your staff. And by supervision, I think we want you to think about not staffing cases, but actually doing professional development. So some of you might change your answers thinking about that. And you guys can see the results coming up. We're going to give you a few minutes to answer. And again, this might change depending on the experience level of your staff. So you may have some that you meet with weekly and some that you meet with monthly. But thinking about an average, or maybe thinking about after you get them up and running, what does it look like? You see we've got two brave souls that are like, yeah, whenever I can grab them in the hall, right? I totally get that. That's so easy to let that happen. Rick, you let me know. You want to end it when you're ready? When you think they've... Okay. Yeah, it looks like everybody's great. Thank you. Thank you. That does give us a little picture. And we all are doing the best we can in an extremely busy job. So we want to just spend a little time thinking about what you can do to up your game a little bit. Like I said, using regular supervision is a journey. It takes practice. So let's talk about some of those. And we talk about this in supervision. You guys are going to recognize this. Cutting down on pop conferences. So cutting down on those hallway or bathroom conferences, or letting people run you down in the parking lot when you're getting ready to leave. We all know, again, that there's going to be emergencies where they're going to have to come and grab you and say, I need you right now. That's an area, though, where you can do some coaching. So if you've got somebody that is constantly coming in and saying, I need to talk to you right now, and what they need to talk about could wait until either your staffing time, if it's a case-related issue, or if it's some other kind of an issue, can it wait until your supervision time, and say to them, so do we need to talk about this right now, or can it wait? And help do some coaching around that. If they say, yes, I absolutely have to talk to you right now, and then you get into it and you realize maybe this could have waited, that's, go ahead and meet their need, but then at the end say, I'm glad you were worried about that, and I wonder if this could have waited until we meet tomorrow at 2 at our regularly scheduled time. So just cutting down on those pop conferences. And the reason we say that, this was really hard for me because it was something that, for me, it felt like being there for my staff. It felt like being present for them, but what it ends up being is me not giving the best answers because I don't have any notes about the case in front of me. I might be on my way to the bathroom, and that might be distracting me. If I'm on my way out at the end of the day, I may have already shifted into not at work mode, and so we don't always give our best answers, and we also don't always get the best information from our staff when we're on the fly. So cutting down on those is going to help you get a little bit better quality in those staffings. You want to tailor your supervision to each worker's learning style or learning needs. If you haven't been to supervision training, when you come through the intro to supervision, you're going to see that we spend a lot of time talking about learning needs and learning styles and how people learn differently. What most of us do is provide our coaching and mentoring in a way that we would best receive it. And unfortunately, that's going to work for 25, 30% of your staff, and the rest of them are going to have a different learning style and have different needs, and you're going to have to figure out how you meet those needs differently. So you want to think about that. We've got several people that don't have sound, and we're going to have somebody get to you and work on that. Okay. You want to build resiliency into your staff. Another thing that we talk about during supervision training, and that's just about, you want to talk about some of the crises that can come up, make sure that they know where they can go for help and assistance before they're in a crisis. That's how you build resiliency. You want to make sure you understand what are their hot button issues that they're going to need a little bit more of your support on before they need that support, so that you can kind of go, oh, this might be a case that might push that button. I may need to check in with them a little bit more often. Resiliency is also about giving them those developmentally appropriate tasks. So maybe not giving them a sex abuse case on their third case, but building up to that, being picky. I know a lot of people do modified rotation when people are first coming on, and I would say that you want to not only control the number, but also the type of cases that folks are getting. And in social work, you need to take care of the whole person, not just the worker. And I think that comes hard for some of our learning styles, sometimes some of our bottom half learning styles, those assimilators and convergers, kind of want to go, well, I don't need to know about their personal life. Well, you might not need to personally, but our jobs touch our personal lives because we deal with children. And most of us have children or care about children, so these things affect us in a different way. We ask our staff to work into their personal life, right? That if this is not an 8 to 5 job, we tell them that all the time. And so what is going on at home will oftentimes affect work. And sometimes what happens at work will affect home. So you do have to do some of that work with your staff and make sure you know what's going on with them and are helping them manage that. And please, please model self-care. We talk about that also a lot in supervision. Don't stay late every single night. We know you got to stay late some nights, but on the nights you can go home at 5, go home at 5. Take a lunch break. Let them see you taking a lunch break. Let them know, I'm on lunch break. Can we talk about this at 1 o'clock or whenever your lunch break is over? And let them know that you expect that they're going to take lunch breaks on most days also. Again, we know there's going to be those days where it just doesn't happen, and that's all the more important that we do it on the days when it really can. So finding ways to model self-care, very important. I'm seeing a question here about appropriate time frame for supervision. Great question. Wow. So what we usually say, if you're talking about staffing, it might be an hour or so. If you're talking about development, an hour really is the tops. Many times you can do it in 30 or 45 minutes even. That's a recommendation. Again, it's going to depend on the worker. It's going to depend on what's going on. If you've got a worker that you're working with really intensely, you might be spending an hour and a half with them. But really, folks, again, remember adult learning. If you're spending more than an hour or an hour and a half, you're going to need to take breaks. So, yeah. Staffing and supervision together, absolutely, absolutely. Group staffings are wonderful. May not be all of your time. You're still going to need, as you saw in the responses to the survey, that people do want individual time, but there is Lauren's right. It's really good to use some group staffing also. Group staffing and even group supervision. So group staffing, they're going to get input on their cases from several different people, and they're going to hear, what's great about that is they hear other people's perspective. Somebody might think it's the worst thing in the world to have a dog that crawls all over the 2-year-old. And other people might go, hey, let me tell you how that calmed my kids down having a pet, or something like that. It gives people different perspectives and things like that. And then you can also talk about some learning things. If there's a specific area, let's take TPSA, the Temporary Parental Safety Agreements. That's a big change for a lot of people. So that's a great thing to do in a group staff development kind of arena, where you take an hour or so and go, let's talk about this. Maybe you even have them do some of the presentation. You take this part and talk for 15 minutes about this, and other worker, you take this part and talk for 15 minutes about that. So yes, absolutely. Those are good ideas, and they don't take the place of individual supervision. Individual supervision still needs to happen. All right. The last bullet on this frame is using learning plans. And I'm going to talk about learning plans a little bit here. And what I want to say as I introduce them is that when I say learning plans, I want to remind folks that I'm not talking about a disciplinary work plan. Learning plans are preventative, not necessarily or really ever about discipline. You may still have a work plan that's about some type of discipline because there's been a problem. But a learning plan is something everybody's going to have, and this really ties into continuous quality improvement. This is about constantly assessing, where are my needs, where can I get a little bit better, and how am I going to get there? Being really, really intentional about how am I going to get there? Instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to do better on keeping up on my documentation, we're going to stop and go, what's keeping me from keeping up on my documentation? How can I bust through that barrier? And what are the activities I'm going to do? And when am I going to do them by? So a couple things to remember. It's not a work plan, and everyone should have one, even supervisors. It's a great role modeling, and to even let workers know, here's what I'm working on my learning plan. I might need some feedback from you guys to tell me how I'm doing, or I might need you to remind me. Some of you might remember an article we read during supervision called Learning Communities. This is how you build a learning community, by valuing learning and encouraging people to always be thinking about how they can improve. So the first thing you're going to do with a learning plan is by assessing the needs. That should be collaborative in nature, not you sitting down and saying, hey, here's what I think your need is, but instead saying, what do you think your needs are? Here's where I see your needs. Which ones do you think you need to work on first? In a minute, I'm going to give you some tools to help you think through that. Think about a learning plan as a parallel process to a service agreement. So it's a great way to model how they can collaborate with families on a service agreement, really getting the family's input, really being creative about how they might address those needs. And here's a little goodie for you. It'll also help you document both good work and lack of progress. So when you get to that time of year where you have to do those evaluations, instead, when you put a 4 or a 5 or whatever your highest number is on there, and your boss says, hey, really, we don't give a lot of 5s. Why did this person get a 5? You can say, let me tell you what they've done this year. I've got it documented here in the learning plans that they've completed. Or if you're giving somebody a 2, you're going to have that documentation that you might need if you get to where you have to do some disciplinary things, because you're going to have documented their progress or lack of progress on those learning plans. It also allows for accountability. Workers, I see it all the time. They leave training and they're excited about doing something different, and I see them a few months later and I say, hey, you were really excited about trying a scaling question. Have you done that? And they're like, no, or I tried one, but I really haven't tried one after that. If they've got something that they really want to try, something they learned in training, or just something that maybe the two of you came up with together, the learning plan allows for accountability because you're going to be checking in on it just like they check in on service agreements for families. All right, the learning plan, I want to point out, there are four documents in your handouts regarding learning plans. One is a guide that the workers can fill out and you can fill out to help them think through what do they want their learning plan to look like. That's the planning part, right? And then you've got the actual learning plan of what are they going to do. And then there's also a guide for you to think about a team learning plan, because these don't have to be just individual. It may be, what can our team do better? That might not be about documentation or CFTs or anything like that. It might be, how do we work better together, or how do we communicate better, whatever that is. So there's also a guide for the team learning plan, and then a page that is the team learning plan. Great. I see you guys are getting some answers to your questions already. So a couple things that that you could think about when you're thinking about performance. One of the things we hear from supervisors is, well, when they've got a problem with their worker, they're going to send them to training, which is a great idea sometimes. So a couple things that I would ask you to think about, and I'm gonna go backwards here. So I'm going to start over on the right side with organizational systems. We want to look at that first. Do they have the tools they need? And again, I know that's not always within your control, but it might be within your influence to think about, do they have the type of computers they need? Do they have a cell phone if they need it? Do they have the support that they need? And again, the only way to know that is asking them, because support looks different to everybody. Do they have the supervision that they need? Again, your first 4 workers may be loving your supervision style, and you may get somebody in that goes, I need this from you. And you may think, why? The other 4 didn't need that. But everybody's a little bit different. So again, checking in and saying, are you getting what you need supervision-wise? Maybe that's what they need. You got to look at caseload size. And again, we all know it's going to spike now and then, but if you look at it over time, you need to look and say, are my expectations doable for what I'm asking them to do? If their caseload size is way out of whack, then you probably can't expect them to be where you might really, really like them to be. And again, while you don't have control over that, you might have some influence where you can give some data to your director, to your county DSS board, your county manager, whoever needs to have it, that says, look what's different when workers have a manageable caseload size. Here's how their documentation is up to date when it's manageable. Here's when it's not manageable. Here's the amount of visits they miss when the caseloads get above this, and here's what it looks like when they're smaller. So really looking at that caseload size. And then do they have the resources? Do you need to go out to your community and say, hey, you know what? We're struggling to provide for these families because we don't have this resource. Who might be able to help us get a certain resource on board? You might be surprised what people would be willing to do if they just know what the needs are. The next thing, if everything's looking good with those things, the next thing you want to look at is their willingness and motivation. Do they value the work? If they don't value the work they're doing, sending them to training is probably not going to change that. I would like to think that I could inspire them to value this work, but it doesn't always work that way. This is a good place to start asking some stay questions to find out, do they value the work? Do they care about the work? Are they interested in it? For some folks, it's, well, this is where I landed, and no, I'm not really interested. This is a stepping stone to something else. I can't train that out of people. You can't train that out of people. What you might do is go, okay, how do we get you to where you want to be? Because we need you to invest in this work. And if you can't, then, that's something we need to work on together so you can get somewhere where you're happier and the work that needs to get done here gets done, because it's such important work. This is where you want to look at things like burnout. You'll see people that used to really want to be eager to learn and to grow, and if they're not, you may have to ask a few of those stay questions. Help them remember why they used to be excited about that work and see if you can't bring that back. That may mean providing them opportunities to take on a new challenge, maybe be on a community committee. Now, somebody's going to say, no, I don't want to do that. That's just more work. Other people are going to go, yes, that's a passion of mine, and I want to do that, and that's going to make me more excited about this work I do here again. So looking at that willingness and motivation and finding out where they're at and thinking about how you can work with that. The next thing you're going to look at is ability and performance, and this is where training is going to come in. Do they have the knowledge, the understanding of the child welfare system, of the philosophy around family-centered practice? Do they have that knowledge to do that? If they don't, then absolutely training is where they need to go. Do they have the skills? Do they really understand empathic listening and when to use empathic listening, because you can't do it all the time? Are they able to de-escalate families when they're struggling? Things like that. Those are the places where training is going to be really helpful. You're only going to frustrate them and yourself if you're sending them for trainings when they know the policy, they have the skills. They're just not using them because their caseload size is too big, or they just don't care about this work anymore. They're mad because they didn't get the last supervision spot. Whatever it is, those are things you need to work on in a different way. Yeah. All right. Once you decide what are the things you want to work on, then you want to think about how you can prioritize them. So this is just a little something. It's not brain surgery, but just a little something to help you think about. If you've got 5 things on your list, let's look at what's more important and what's more frequent. What are the things that come up more often? That's the first thing you want to work on. And again, this is not something you do sitting at your desk by yourself. This is something you do in conversation with your staff. The next one you're going to go to is what are the things that are more important but less frequent? So it's really important, but it doesn't come up as often. Then, after you've dealt with those, you're going to look at what are the things that are more frequent, happen more often, but aren't quite as important. And of course, lastly, less frequent and less important. So as you go down this prioritization tree, if you want to call it that, you are fine-tuning, right? You get those first 2 up there. Those are going to be those big things that that you have to take care of. And as they get better at those big things, and you're like, hey, I don't know what else to work on with this worker. They're doing a great job. There's always some fine-tuning that can be done. So what can we do just a little bit better? Can they do something better in their documentation? Are they a little bit impatient with their families? Can they work on that? What's the area where you can do that fine-tuning? And that's what those last 2 things are going to get to a little bit more. All right, are you guys tired of my voice? Because I kind of am. So I'm going to turn it over to Dawn, and she's going to talk about some real-world work that they've been doing in Robeson County. Dawn, are you ready?
Yes, I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Dawn Maynor. I'm with Robeson County Department of Social Services. I've been employed there almost 21 years. Been a supervisor in child welfare almost 14 years. I'm glad to be with you today and just share a little bit about what we do in our county. In Robeson County, I'm a CPS assessment supervisor. We have staffing weekly. That's due to the fact that our workers receive 2 to 3 cases a week. We have set aside 1 day a week where we meet with them. During that time, it's their immediate supervisor and another supervisor in the department. The time's been previously scheduled the prior month. We've given them a calendar of the days that we're available that week, and they sign up as needed, and we staff their cases. It's a group decision-making process, and the workers sign up, and it's a round robin for the workers. So sometimes they're able to sit in and hear another worker present their case, and learn some things if they're a new worker. Also weekly, we provide supervision individually with our workers. During that time, they go over all the cases for which they're responsible for in our office in a private setting. During the meeting, we discuss the families in great detail. We discuss issues that the family may have. We discuss goals of the case, what the worker can do to assist the family, how we can ensure the safety of the children. And we start preparing the case for what the steps are to get it staffed, because that's the goal line as well, because we're on a time frame. During this time, we document notes on what we're discussing on each case, and at the end of the meeting, the worker gets a copy of that, and the supervisor maintains a copy of that. So everything discussed is documented, and we're all on the same page. If there's any questions on things, we go over it at that time. After that staffing, we provide supervision. During supervision, we discuss how the worker's progressing. We discuss their improvements. We discuss previous areas workers may have difficulties. We pinpoint what actions the worker needs to take in order to cause success for families, success in their own development. We build on what they're doing and what the next steps look like. We celebrate their growth as well, because we can discuss what we talked about last time and how some barriers have been changed into successes since our last meeting. During supervision, we pinpoint areas of needed skill development. We all have weaknesses, and we remind our staff of that. We stress the importance of facing challenges head-on, whether it be together or with gaining more knowledge as to how the weaknesses can be turned into a strength. Supervisors are available to go out with staff. When we go out, we are active participants in the visit, but we allow the workers to carry out the needed actions of the visit. We help them when needed. We show support. We encourage them. During this time, we're coaching the worker. We're there to enhance their morale, improve their motivation, and their productivity. We show support in their professional growth. After the visit, during travel, we discuss what went on during the visit. We offer advice, guidance as to the encounter, what went right and what could have been done differently. Experienced senior staff often go out with our workers as well. That seems to help new workers get comfortable as well. Supervisors may offer more assistance by in-house training one-on-one, where you're meeting with them one-on-one, and we go over forms that they may have difficulty understanding. We may discuss more issues in the manual that they need to overcome challenges with. We also, as a source of resource, we send them to state training if needed. I remember a worker who went to forensic interview, and she was having problems in regards to her questioning, and that training helped her so well. And we constantly, in supervision, we talk about that training consistently over and over because it was a valuable resource for her. We support the transfer of learning from training, so that's valuable. We're molding our workers, so we value supervision time. Every worker is different, and we understand that, and they need different levels of support. So we try to, establish what each worker needs and make sure it fits the need for that worker. What may be working for one worker may not work for other. We also promote helping them to prevent burnout. This may be, what do we need to do to help them? Do we need to jump in? Do I need to make a visit for you? Do I need to help you with this paperwork? What the worker needs, we have to help them. We have to jump in. We offer protected time in the office. The workers have availability of the office away from their normal work site where they can be separate from everyone and have a space that may be more conducive to working. We find out if other workers may be able to help staff. Maybe they just have so much going on. Maybe they took some children last night. They have a lot of paperwork today. Another staff member can help and join in and do a visit that they had scheduled that they're not able to do. We support them also taking needed time off if need be. We promote self-care. We try to make a plan to help them. During supervision, we use time to reflect, to empower the worker. We build resilience. We discuss their strengths. We build them up. We try not to knock them down. Remember that they are not alone and that we all have difficult times and we all have difficult cases. We discuss any recent events where they may have shined. We all love to know that we've done something good. So workers need to hear that. They need to hear more and more of it. It's encouraging. They may have assisted someone else. They may have showed great teamwork. They may have done well in court. We always try to boost their morale and make them feel self-worth. During this time, the workers, we make sure that we're an active listener. We try to show understanding, make sure you're concentrating on their needs. We give valued responses. We show empathy and value for their conversation. This time is to focus on them and explain to them that not only do they have our support, but that we actually care. Some workers may feel their supervisor doesn't care. That's important to know that they care, that you care for them. So we try to do that in Robeson County.
Hey, Dawn,
We also have group activities.
real quick before you jump into group supervision, there's a couple of questions of folks just trying to understand the structure, or Robeson, get a little more detail. It looks like Janelle might have helped you out with one of the answers, but questions about how many workers do you guys supervise, and then how many cases you're staffing in an hour, and what's the caseload size?
Our supervisory staffing assessments, we have anywhere from 4 to possibly 5 workers we supervise at this time. We actually have a staffing calendar, and that is actually scheduled for us to staff all day as supervisors. So it is round robin. The workers could staff a case. It could take very well 15 minutes. It could take an hour. It just depends on the cases. Every case is different. Usually, I wouldn't say we usually take an hour to staff a case, because we have documentation tools that document a lot of what the worker done on the case that we look at, and we have the use of computer equipment where we're looking at all the forms while we're in staffing, and there's 2 supervisors, so one supervisor may be checking one thing while another supervisor is checking something else. So it goes pretty fast, but it does take the time of the supervisors. It's way more time for the supervisors than it is the workers, but the workers need it. So we value that time with them. I think Janelle said that the goal is for 3 a week. We do try to tell our workers we want them to staff weekly. If we don't promote staffing weekly, they may come in with 5 or 6 cases. So we promote weekly. We promote 3 cases, hopefully is the max, but we don't turn a worker away. We don't want cases going over. So we try to staff them as soon as they're available to staff. And when I do mean staff, that's making a decision. It's preparing the case whether to close or whether to transfer. And that is 1 day a week. That's what we set aside as a supervisor. I think that may have answered all the questions. I'm not sure.
It looks like you got those structured questions very well. I think we can move on, and then we'll continue to gather your questions as you type them in and look for opportunities to answer them. Thanks, Dawn.
Thank you. That puts us into group activities of what we do at Robeson County. As supervisors, we meet regularly to discuss changes in policies. We address issues specific to casework. We strategize to assist the workers. We, in the supervisor meeting, we discuss consistencies among us. We also discuss our differences and what we can do as supervisors to become more consistent. We find that workers want consistency. They want to know when I'm out and they go to another supervisor that it's going to be a similar discussion. It's going to be a similar encounter. So we try to make sure that we're consistent across the board, but there's sometimes you just can't help it. Every family is different. Every case is different. We also find that as supervisors, whatever barriers or whatever problems we have, another supervisor may be facing them. So during those meetings, we also discuss that. We can get feedback from each other. As a department, we have quarterly meetings. This is when all the workers in the department come to a meeting, as well as the supervisors. During those meetings, we ensure information is shared consistently across the unit. We discuss the implementation strategies of new policy. We discuss the stress of the job and encourage teamwork. Workers realize that they may not be the only one that has a problem in the meeting. Someone may discuss something and another worker can piggyback on it, and so it's a good time for them to build on each other in regards to what's working, what's not, what we need to change, how we can better meet the needs of our county and the families that we're serving. Also, this is a great time for workers to socialize. Sometimes a worker may give a success story of something that happened or how they had a challenge and what they've done to solve the problem, and so it does help other workers. After those meetings, we usually have a break. We bring snacks as supervisors. We allow the workers to socialize after the meeting. They just enjoy the time to unwind. So it's really a good time for them just to, build their team together, work together, just unwind a moment and, bring us all back together. Sometimes we just need a little bit of reviving, and sometimes we find those meetings help. I think that's about everything I wanted to cover as far as Robeson County, so it's just been a brief discussion of how we handle things and what we offer. So at this time, I'll turn the mic over to Miss Amanda McGee, the Program Manager with Rutherford County.
Thank you, Dawn. I'd like to say thank you to everybody to begin with, that all of the information from Dawn and also from Holly is just really good stuff, and I want to honor what everybody said. So before we start, I will just say that in Rutherford County, we do supervise at we follow the state program of supervisors with 1 to 5. Sorry, my screen just went out, which was a little distracting. So we have 1 supervisor to 5 social workers. And so what makes the difference? And I want to say that, we are teachers and mentors for our social workers. We have direct responsibility for all the clients assigned to them, all of the children and families. And so as supervisors, I believe that we need to know those cases. I think that supervision, regular weekly supervision, is the single most important element for keeping kids safe. And I'll tell you that when we started our supervision process, it's because we wanted to improve our systems. And this was my supervisory team and our director and myself, and this was a couple of years ago. We wanted to improve our system. Our caseloads were just huge. We had assessment cases between 60 and 90 for a social worker. Foster care had cases of 15 to 20. In-home cases were high. Our social workers were unhappy. We needed to make some changes, and so we asked the state for a review. And so that gave us a baseline, and that review process has just been extremely helpful for us. I would say that what we've learned is that supervising with intention should be an everyday activity, and it's our job to inspire and grow social workers. And I also want to say that we need to realize that in the helping profession, one of the things that we learn first is do no harm. And I believe this applies to supervision as well. And I just say that knowing that everybody singing to the choir here believes that. But it's just something we should remember every day, that respect for our social workers, our responsibility of fostering and growing social workers in a positive way. Every word, every action counts. So with supervisory, I'm forgetting to move my slides. Okay. How do I do that, Rick? Oh, here we go. Okay. So what makes the difference? The supervisory structure really makes a huge difference, and that is that we have to know that we're supervising with intention at different levels. So the case level supervision that I'm talking about is different than what you've heard from Dawn, in that this is a weekly 1-hour supervision session between a social worker and a supervisor to staff maybe up to 3 cases, depending on the cases and how much time each one takes. It could be 1 case if it's a new case, or it might be several cases. And so that case level supervision has very specific outcomes. You can refer to handouts that I provided to look at what needs to be discussed during those sessions. The social worker level supervision is we really follow a once-a-month structure where we are working with a social worker to talk about how they're feeling, what their needs are, what their development needs are, what's working for them, what would they like to see change, what would they like to see added to a development plan, and also to give some feedback. And these monthly, it's always appropriate to give more social worker level supervision than once a month when that's necessary, whether you have a brand new social worker or a tenured social worker. But that monthly session is super important because we call that formative feedback, and those once a month sessions add up to the your annual performance level supervision, so that nothing is ever a surprise, and that by the time you get to your end of your year, the social worker and the supervisor are right on board. It's a very inspiring meeting, and everybody, the plan has been paved throughout the whole year. The field level observation, I want to just say, is something that I think is undervalued and maybe underutilized. We rely on our social workers to give us information about what they're seeing in the field. And so that means we have to rely on the information that they give us during supervision. And we have to know that they're accurate. So how do we do that? We have to know that they're able to assess and assimilate and report back to the supervisor exactly what's going on in the field. So it's important for supervisors to have a planned time, I think, to go out with social workers. Sometimes supervisors go out to help with the case. This is the time I'm talking about, to go out to observe. And it's hard because when supervisors are in the field, it's easy for a social worker to want to back up and for a supervisor to want to take over. But this is the time to observe, and then after the visit to ask the social worker what they noticed, and then to give very specific feedback about what it is that they learned. And that way you can be sure as a supervisor that your social worker is assessing and assimilating and reporting back to you the information that's important and appropriate. I just can't tell you how important this is, and that way when you're in your weekly supervision sessions, you have confidence at a 10, if 10 is very high, that the information that you're getting is accurate. Group level or unit level supervision is also important, and this is a time where social workers are together, maybe staffing cases, and they're building peer relationships and sharing information, sharing skill and knowledge. It's a good time to build trust across social workers. So case level supervision is once a week I track this actually on a log for no less than 50 minutes. Social worker level supervision, although you may do much more than this, we track it at a once a month level, and it can be however long it takes. The field level observation is quarterly and critically important to make sure that assessing and assimilating and reporting skills are there. And group level supervision can be whatever. We do this on the 4th week or at least 1 week out of a month in our agency, and that seems to work well for our folks. So understanding and practicing a coaching model of supervision is important. The practice of using reflective practice and giving feedback during case supervision, and understanding the formative feedback that I just talked about on an ongoing basis is really important, and that professional development of every social worker level supervision is important. It's not just knowing It's knowing what training did they come to your agency with, what degree, what is their experience, what training have they had, and then what is their framework for operating with families, and what training have they had. The difference between our social workers and supervisors is the level of skill, which is usually equated to their education and the training. So it's really important to track the training that our social workers have, and to make sure that they're really up to date in their training. And the model matters. So this is incredibly important because the model that you use, if you use a top-down supervision model, which is directive, these models tend to foster a climate of fear, staff stifles personal growth, and it contributes to low morale and staff turnover. The coaching model, which is collaborative, fosters problem solving and accountability. The biggest thing with the coaching model is that this model actually increases child safety, in my view. And it's because social workers are likely to tell you their case problems and issues. They're going to openly discuss their mistakes. Whereas if the environment is not as collaborative, or if social workers are afraid of supervisors, then they're not going to walk in the door and tell you what their case mistakes are. And so we want to use, I think, a coaching model, even though it's harder, but it is a model that creates a framework where social workers are feel free to talk about what's going well in the case, but more importantly, what are the issues? What needs to be changed? And I can tell you that it's easier said than done. So it takes a commitment to engagement and collaboration with the social worker. And this means really that supervisors have to be very self-aware of where they are on any given day. How are you feeling? What's going on with you? Because if we're not self-aware as leaders, then it's easy to not even recognize if you're working with a social worker in a way that's less helpful, or if your mood is getting in the way, perhaps. And so we want to help social workers discover their answers through the problem solving and helping them to build social worker skills through that collaboration and coaching model. But it's really hard. So I'm saying this because it's so easy for all of us in a leadership role to say, oh, I do that, I want to do that, I know I do that. The truth is, on any given day, as we say, I say frequently in the office, I think I get it right about half the time, and I work on it. And so I think we have to just be aware that it's really not that easy. When we're talking about critical thinking, the first thing that happens to me when someone presents an idea that is really different from what I think should be happening, I have to tell myself, slow down, listen, think about this, and really absorb the information. And only when I do that do I know that I'm actively practicing what I hope my social workers are practicing. And so I'm just saying that it's hard for all of us, and if we're honest, well, I think we should work on it every day. And if we do this, then we can get better at recognizing faulty reasoning or logic, like, you know, emotional reasons for making a decision about a child, or reasons that have more to do with what we believe as people rather than what the facts tell us about the case. We have to be able to analyze, and that's that assimilating and drawing accurate conclusion based on the facts of the case, not based on what we think should be happening. So making mistakes, this gets back to two things. The culture in an agency, if the culture is one of coaching and collaboration, then we can build a culture where making mistakes is okay. And in this framework, it's important to know that supervisors, we have to be the experts. We have to know North Carolina DSS policy inside and out, upside and down, in one way or another. And we have to know the NASW Code of Ethics. Because if you know those things and you refer to them frequently, not just believe you know it, but actually check it, because when you're staffing with social workers, you have to know that they are between the two pillars of ethics and policy. I can't underestimate the NASW Code of Ethics. We all carry the title of social worker, and so we should follow the Code of Ethics. And cases, when we're staffing cases, we can unknowingly be outside of policy and be outside of ethics really quickly and not even know it. And good social workers, this can happen too. So it's important as supervisors to know those things, and then as you're staffing, make sure that you guide social workers and teach to those things so that we can keep them between those models. So again, social workers feel safe about talking about case mistakes using a coaching model. When social workers are afraid to make mistakes, they're more likely to hide them. When this happens, the vicarious liability rests with us. So when social workers go home with case mistakes or case problems that you don't know about, you have that liability, and also, we have wrongly assigned that liability to our directors and also to the state. And so I get back to individual supervision of cases is absolutely important for keeping children safe and keeping the liability, the vicarious liability that we all carry, really low. Again, the individual development plans are crucial to continued growth and learning. That can be also, I ask staff frequently, where do you want to be in a couple of years? How do you want to develop? What roles do you want to have? Let us help you get there. So it's hard work, but it's also the most rewarding work. I've been doing this almost 30 years now, and it is the most rewarding work that I've ever done. So in Rutherford County, I asked my team of supervisors, who I think are amazing, how do we achieve consistency? And what they said is, well, we hold ourselves accountable to our agreed upon goals. So we keep our caseloads below the state standards. And remember, we were up at crazy caseloads. We meet weekly as a group of leaders for 2 to 3 hours once a week to discuss our progress. We openly talk about our mistakes, and we talk about our relationships with each other. We talk about trust. It might be strange to hear that here, but we regularly talk about trust, and we keep it on the table when there's been a breach of trust or somebody's upset about something. We talk about it. And we're really just trying to learn to be open about our mistakes and talk about them openly. I get feedback regularly from my team about what I can do better, and that's valuable. I think modeling, you know, it's humbling to work with such great supervisors, and so I think getting feedback from them is important. We laugh a lot. When I don't hear laughter in the hall, I get worried. Something isn't right. I need to hear that laughter, and when I don't, I go looking for what's the stress and how can we reduce it. We cry together, and we own our successes, and we own our mistakes as a team, and I carry those things with me, and I try to do the best job that I can to own all of the work as a team. We realize at the failures, that is. I want to take that off the shoulders of the supervisors. And we realize we're a work in progress. We just keep working on it, and we're going to just keep on working on it. So again, that's the end of my talk. I just want to say that it is possible to get from crazy outlandish caseloads to under the state level. And individual supervision is absolutely the most important part of our work. And I'm going to turn it back over to Rick, I think, right?
Yes, thank you very much. And Amanda, before we move on to some general questions, folks, please continue to do that. Type those into the chat box. There's a couple questions that came up that Dawn and Holly were trying to answer at times too in the chat box, but just if there's anything you want to expand on from your perspective, from the Rutherford County perspective. Basic structure questions again. What's the caseload size now? Process of closing out a case on the supervisor's end, and then you might see another one there too.
Okay, so in Rutherford County, I can tell you that our CPS caseloads are consistently below the state mandate of 10. When we get to 9 or 10, that feels like a stressor now compared to again, 60 to 90 per social worker. So backlogs can be managed. The process of closing out the cases is on the supervisor's end, who does the paperwork when they make a decision with a social worker that a case can be closed. There are times where a couple of social supervisors get together and confer, is this decision make sense? Sometimes if there are just some perplexing issues about a case, we talk about it, but we have moved away from a day-long process, which we did have in place, to the individual process between a supervisor and a social worker. And when there are questions about if a case is ready to close or not, then the supervisors confer with each other and sometimes me. What happens if documentation does not reflect what they staffed in the case decision? Well, we work with the social workers on that, and we work. That's again why I want to get back to making sure that social workers reflect to supervisors, but clearly in their dictation exactly what happened. So again, that have they assessed, did they assimilate, and can they report information accurately, which really relies on their ability to think critically, and it also relies on the supervisor's ability to know policy, know your ethics, know where the case is, where did it start, where did it need to go, and where is it now. And we give feedback, and we do a lot of training on dictation. We try to keep any value judgment words out of dictation and keep doing dictation as a factual, presenting the facts of the case in order to make decisions. I don't know if there's any other questions.
Here's one more I see here that was saying, you referenced at one point that you guys had a backlog essentially. You had 60 or 90 cases. How long did it take to get those cases below the state standard?
It's a process. This is like turning an ocean liner in the ocean. You have to set your direction, confer with your state reps with your direction, make your plan, initiate your, try to get, I would say, really good synergy going with your team, your social workers and your supervisors. It helps when everybody, I would say it's essential to get everybody's buy-in. And you set the direction that the first thing that you need to say is, it is possible. We can get to the state standards. I know that you can do that. It just takes dedication, it takes tenacity. You have to decide you're going to do it, and you have to start and not stop. If you take your foot off the gas pedal, then you won't get there. I would say it's important to continuously confer with your state reps, because reducing caseloads, I'd be happy to share with anybody privately or in a group or however you want to do it, with what we did. It took us a while, and there is time where you can't see the forest through the trees. And, I found it my role during that time to continuously say, you can do this, we can do this, you will feel better, you will be able to do the social work that you came here to do when your caseloads are lower. But there are times in that process where it just doesn't feel that way. It's really hard and it's painful. But if you stick to it, eventually the flywheel begins to spin, and you start to see the daylight, social workers' chins start popping up, and it starts to roll. And I wouldn't go back, but to those days again. Doing social work in an area where you can follow the state standards, be within guidelines, caseloads where they need to be, it is possible. And then I can just say we really do the social work that we needed to do.
Sure.
Holly's going to jump in.
So I just wanted to point out to folks what Amanda just described is such an awesome example of Bridges neutral zone that we talk about in training. If you remember that first week, we talk about that transition, and that change is or transition is external, and what we're looking for is an internal change, and that you have to go through that neutral zone where it feels exactly like what it's scary, and it feels like you're not going to get to the other end and all those other things. But that's where creativity and growth happens. So you have to just buckle up your seatbelt and sit through that neutral zone and get to the other side. So I just wanted to add that in. Thanks for that great example.
Thanks, Holly. So, okay, back to Rick.
Thanks to both of you. And we do have one that's specific to Robeson County. Dawn, you might see here, are there other soft skills you talked about included in your annual reviews? And if so, how?
As far as our annual reviews, I think in our staffing, some of the forms we use, adding some extra questions that maybe we were having issues on as a county, we've added to make sure that we're touching those factors and making sure that the workers are doing what they need to do. Some of those may be contacting absent fathers that we may have been having some issues on some cases, and we needed to make sure that we pinpointed those areas that we needed more focus. So as far as the annual review, we've shared the tools we use in our staffing as far as the checklist that we use, and in our staffing of caseloads in regards to making sure we're documenting when the case came in, when our deadline goal is, so we can stay on target.
Dawn, Amanda's going to jump into.
Yeah, I just saw the comments about dictation. We make sure that dictation is absolutely complete before we sign off on any cases as well. That's a huge responsibility, and I agree with whoever said that. I don't know where that is now, that dictation needs to be done, and supervisors need to read through it and know that we actually use the state monitoring tool before we close cases. The social worker brings the case and has gone through the state monitoring tool, and then the supervisor goes through it and signs off on it as a QA tool, and we scan that into the record so that we know when cases are closed that we've done the best job that we can do.
So one other question I saw come up earlier that either Amanda or John or both of you could jump in. I saw Holly was trying to respond to it in the chat box, was what do you think about mandatory time off to support self-care for workers? Any recommendations you guys have about mandatory time off for workers?
Like mandatory, like vacation time or comp time?
Yeah, I'm assuming, yeah, mandatory vacation time.
I guess I would say that depends on the scenario. If a social worker appeared to me to be really, really stressed, and it is our job to know how our social workers are performing. Are they okay? Are they doing their job with clear mind? Every day we need to know that. And if there's a time that a social worker appears to be stressed for some reason, then we might do a couple of things. We have offered social workers time with to talk with someone, to talk about how they're feeling. That trauma that social workers feel is very real, and it's very important to recognize. So offering social workers support to talk through things privately is important. It could be that we suggest to a social worker that they take some comp time to take a day to rest and relax. We have done that as well. I've never had to mandate that someone do that. It's usually a conversation, but I think if a social worker was not performing their responsibilities in a manner that's safe and effective, and that it was due to work stressors or those kinds of things, that I would confer with our director and probably HR, and we might make a decision to ask someone to take time off. So I think that probably depends on policies in the individual DSSs, but certainly recognizing the trauma that social workers feel and managing that is important, and that can include a variety of strategies, including time off.
I think that's similar to Robeson County. We notice when a worker has a valuable amount of comp time, that tends to show that they're overworking, and we stress the importance of taking that time off, taking time for them, not to let the job consume them. So if they have a large amount of comp time, we do support them taking that time off. We also have an employee assistance program. If we see that a worker's having some issues, whether it be personal, whether it be some mental health issues or something that's going on personally in their home and they feel they need counseling or they need someone to talk with, we can refer them to that agency. That would be up to them to do that. It's a program that we have at the office that we can recommend workers to go to or refer them to, or a worker can use on their own. But there is a level of confidentiality there. And it is, if it's something we recommend them to use or we refer them to, so there is some protected time as far as them going to handle that. We also have a nurse available as far as wellness with our agency that workers can go to if needed. So there's resources within our county to aid workers in regards to handling the stress if needed.
And I think what I was speaking to in my answer is the word mandatory, especially. If I'm given mandatory time off, that really feels disciplinary to me. And so I think you want to make sure that it's not misconstrued that way, and that it be a conversation of, do you need some time off? And I'll let you guys read my comments are on there, but I just think it's important that you're careful that it not be, oh, you're sad because your grandmother died, so I'm sending you home because you're not, you know what I mean? So just thinking about that word mandatory is what struck me.
Right. I would concur with what Holly just said, and being very careful about that. So there's a question that is, how much comp time did staff supervisors accumulate in order to get caught up in Rutherford? I actually don't remember. We did move people around. I don't remember. Our comp time was high because social workers were trying to manage high caseloads. So part of the strategy that we had in place was, we did need to reduce our comp time overall just because it was so high. So through the process of moving through getting the caseloads under control, we moved people around. We moved a person from adoptions into CPS, who had been trained in CPS and had done CPS work. So I tend to look at the entire system, and I move people where they need to be. And now our comp time has been consistently going down for the last 2 years. So you might have a strategy that your director agrees to, that you're going to increase comp time for a little while just to be able to manage whatever your strategy is to get your caseloads under control. Or some counties I know have brought other people in. So again, I think you have to do whatever you need to do, and it needs to be an approved strategy. Right now, our comp time stays low. It's not going up, and it has consistently been going down since we've gotten the caseloads under control. So there's a lot of benefits, really, with caseloads being under control. If documentation isn't completed, how can you ensure that to be clear, when we close cases, our documentation is completed. We don't close cases without the documentation in the record being absolutely 100% completed.
Thank you for all of your questions. We are certainly gathering them all and to be included in a follow-up document that goes out to all registered participants. And I'm going to throw it over to Holly for one.
All right, you guys have heard me say it before. It doesn't do any good to sit in on a webinar or a training if you don't do anything with it. So one thing we'd like you to do is just think about what's one thing. Don't overdo. Just what's one thing you're going to do in response to something you've learned today. It might be a small thing. Type it into chat, and I really encourage you, talk to a coworker about it. Talk to your supervisor about it. Talk to your team about it. Ask somebody to hold you accountable to it, because we call it the tornado that happens when you get back in your office. It's hard when you get back in there to make these changes, and having an accountability partner can be helpful. And I see them coming in. That's awesome. Thanks. I'm going to let Rick finish up as you guys type those in. Let's see. Let's take a look. Oh, good. I'm glad to see that analyzing performance was helpful for folks. Structured individual staffings. Yeah, I think that's something that we, again, in the tornado, it gets lost. So glad to hear that. Learning plans. Let me know if I can help with any of that. If you guys have questions, my email address will be at the end. Yeah, more professional development. Minimizing pop conferences, one of those things that's easier said than done, but great. Nice. Discussing mistakes. These look great. Looks like learning plans are popular. And pop-in supervision. Yeah, I see Kelly saying she's going to be diligent about keeping those staffing times. We get pulled in so many directions, but we really have to set some priorities and say, my staff, the time that I'm working with my staff is important. That's beautiful, because really we're telling them how much we value them and their work when we do that. Great.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for typing your responses in the chat box. It's great to hear that you guys are learning and hopefully able to take something back with you that you can apply in your work. Here is the presenter's contact information. It's also in your handouts, of course, but if you wanted to just send them an email as a thank you, of course, if you have a follow-up question, I'm sure they might be happy to help you out there too. There were certainly lots of questions along the way about particular tools that Robeson and Rutherford County were using that we did say we would try and include also in the follow-up document, just FYI. So we have all of your registrations for your email addresses so that we can send that information out.
And I have emailed myself a list of the people that asked to get on the MRS list, so I'll get you on tonight. The next one's tomorrow morning, so look for an email early tomorrow morning about that.
All right, so if this presentation's piqued your interest in further training, for example, you guys had a good discussion around secondary trauma. That's one of the courses available to you that's pretty new to supervisors, secondary trauma for supervisors, but in their file share pod there's some handouts. One of them is a one-pager on some current trainings that are available to supervisors right now that are targeting supervisors. Of course, we're actually working on developing some more to hopefully be available next year. But check that out if this has piqued your interest in some additional courses. There's at least a half a dozen there in your handouts.